Hello and welcome to FP Live. I'm Ravi Agrawal, Foreign Policy's Editor-in-Chief. Now, we often discuss war and conflict on this program, and today I want to focus on a non-traditional war, and that is the chip wars. Over the last few decades, China has begun to catch up with the United States in several arenas. Its military might, its economic clout, innovations in clean energy. But one area where it is known to be significantly behind is in manufacturing high-end chips or semiconductors. The Biden administration has tried very hard to keep it that way. The question now is what a Trump administration will do to maintain US primacy in high-end computing. Very quick primer here. Chips are used in everything from microwaves to your smartphones, but the highest end semiconductors are truly special. They are the ones that have exponentially more computing power and are behind the big AI boom. And that's what both companies and countries are trying to control. If this is your first time on FP Live, here's how we do it. These are usually 30 to 40-minute conversations with experts and policymakers, sometimes world leaders, and we take subscriber questions. Subscribers can also watch our back catalog. The most recent episode is on Syria and Lebanon. It's extremely timely. So if you want to join in, hit the subscribe button, use the code FP Live for a hefty discount. We're also a podcast, which I urge you to follow. So, the chip wars. Trump has a big background here. He kickstarted many of the restrictions on China, on Huawei, on banning sales of Dutch lithograph machines, and Biden expanded on them. The question now is what Trump might do in a second term and how that will interplay with another big agenda item on his mind, tariffs. Well, my guest today is the world's leading expert on semiconductor competition. Chris Miller is the author of Chip War, The Fight for the World's Most Critical Technology. He's also a professor at Tufts University's Fletcher School. Chris, welcome back to FP Live.
Thanks for having me back.
So I'm going to start with some very, very basic questions. Why do we care where our chips are made?
Well, I think there are two reasons why you might care where chips are made. The first has to do with supply chain security. Can you get access to the chips that you need? And because chips are in everything, in cars, in microwaves, in missile systems, you need thousands and thousands of chips per person to make an economy function. And today there's great concentration in the supply chain in Korea, but above all in Taiwan, which produces many of the most advanced chips, including 99% of the chips that are used for training AI systems. That's the first reason. If you lose access to Korea or Taiwan, the entire global electronic supply chain will freeze up. The second reason why you might care where your chips are made is because data security really matters. And I think it doesn't take a frequent reader of spy novels to imagine ways that governments might try to use access to semiconductors as a means of gaining access to networks and devices for both espionage, but also for sabotage purposes, as we've seen with Israel's recent pager operation vis-a-vis Hezbollah. And that's the second reason why the provenance of chips is not just an economic question, it's also a political question.
Hmm. Now, you partially answered a question I was going to ask you. It's a subscriber question from Dale Planikver. But the question is, what other countries are in the running in this big race? You mentioned Taiwan, but if you had to rank them all, how do they fare?
Well, it depends a bit on which types of chips you're looking at because different countries specialize in different types of chips. When you're looking at the processor chips that make possible smartphones or PCs or AI systems, Taiwan is by far and away the world's leader. But processors alone aren't enough to have a type of system that you'd use. You also need memory chips that can store data, and there Korea is the world's leader. For certain types of communications chips or sensors, there are companies in Japan or the US or Europe which also have important roles to play. China is the world's biggest buyer of semiconductors. It spends as much money each year importing chips from all the other countries that I mentioned as it does importing oil. but it's trying to catch up. And so the biggest change in the chip industry over the last decade has been China's very active industrial policy as it seeks to move up the technology ladder and become self-sufficient in an increasingly large share of semiconductors.
What about the United States? You didn't mention that.
The United States is a leader in chip design. Companies like NVIDIA, Qualcomm, Apple, and also big tech companies like Microsoft, Meta, and Alphabet. They are some of the most capable chip designers in the world. And if you look at valuation from an economic perspective, NVIDIA is the largest chip company by far, but NVIDIA has never manufactured a single semiconductor. Most of the firms that I listed work with the world's biggest chip manufacturer to actually produce all of the chips they design. And that's Taiwan's TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which is the world's largest chip maker and also the world's most advanced chip maker, which means that there's deep, deep interdependence between Silicon Valley's biggest tech companies and Taiwan's biggest chip manufacturer. Neither one of them can operate without the other. And that's been a great partnership in terms of driving technological progress, in terms of enabling new types of products, but it also entails extraordinary risk if something were to happen to Taiwan.
Mm. Now, at the start of this show, I sort of said that China is far behind the United States when it comes to chip design and chip manufacturing, at least at the highest end of it. I mean, tell me if what I said was correct, and if so, I mean, how far behind is China?
But it is correct, although China is trying very hard to catch up. And I think here you've got to differentiate between chip design, chip manufacturing, and then the production of the machines that are used to manufacture chips. And this is an entirely separate level of the supply chain where the US has a much, much bigger footprint than when it comes to just the manufacture of chips themselves. There are five big companies around the world that produce the most high-end tools that are used to make chips. Three are based in California, one is based in Japan, and perhaps the most important is based in the Netherlands, a company called ASML, which makes a type of tool called a photolithography machine, without which you can't make the most advanced chips. And so if you go inside the most advanced chip maker in Taiwan, TSMC, you'll find machines from each of these five companies inside of it. What's also true, if you go inside of China's most advanced chip making facilities, you'll also find tools from each of these five companies inside because China's even further behind when it comes to making the machines that make chips than it is to making chips itself. If you zoom in on your specific question, how far is China behind on chip making? We had a great data point come out this week. Huawei, the leading Chinese telecommunications firm, as well as China's leading AI hardware firm, just released its newest smartphone. And we had a breakdown of the chip that was inside of it, produced by China's leading chip maker, a company called SMIC. It was produced with a manufacturing process that in Taiwan, TSMC had pioneered around 2018, which means that the leading Chinese firm, SMIC, is around 5 or 6 years behind TSMC. And just final point, that might not sound like a lot, only being 5 years behind, but because of what's known as Moore's law, the computing capability of chips doubles roughly every 2 years. So if you're 6 years behind, you're three doublings behind the cutting edge. And so that's a position that China does not want to be in, and it's a position that makes Taiwan so extraordinarily important.